Okay, welcome to episode 9 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. Thank you for all the feedback so far. Really appreciate it, and hopefully what people have said, they're getting a lot out of podcasts in a way that is easily applicable to your life to improve it in terms of fat loss, health, and overall happiness, which is the goal. Now today what we're going to talk about is an interesting subject, and this is kind of the number of stages that I'll bring a client through when I first start with them to do kind of an overall assessment of that person's life. Okay, because just like we talked about in the habits episode, the goal in terms of fat loss, yes, we need to create a calorie deficit, but a lot of times it's not as simple as that. Okay, because when we're doing it, we're trying to modify our behaviors, and there's a number of mechanisms that can either help us or hinder us in that. And when we look at behavior change, what we're trying to do, in very, very simple terms, is to make it easy for us to carry out our good habits, okay, that align with us losing fat. And we're trying to make it harder to carry out those habits that inhibit that fat loss. So make it easy to carry out good habits and make it hard to carry out bad habits. And now, this brings us on to the topic of our environment. Now, I'll get a lot of clients, whether it's face-to-face or on social media, again, through no fault of their own, because this is what it looks like from a surface level, that they say, Sean, if I had more willpower, I would be at my dream body. Or if I had more self-control, like, that's what I need to improve. I want to work with you. I want to improve my self-control. Yeah, I want you to teach me how to say no to all those chocolates. Because if I had that really big battery of willpower and self-control and discipline, I would be where I want to be. But unfortunately, I don't. I lack discipline, I lack self-control, and I lack willpower. Okay? So I'm going to give you all this money, and if you could just teach me all the magic tricks about how to improve those things, that would be brilliant. And unfortunately, there's way more to it than that. Or fortunately as well, because it means that for all the times that you have failed in the past, it's not down to your lack of willpower, your lack of self-control, your lack of effort. It's actually a lot of time down to our environment. And one of the big reasons that we are out of shape is our environment. It's our environment in the Western world is what's called an obesogenic environment. So it's kind of made for us to be out of shape. What we need to do first, look at why it's set up that way, or why it's set up that way is easy. So all of the food companies can make big profit margins and make lots of money, and they don't really give a fuck about our health and stuff like that once their pockets are nice and big and nice and full. So one of the big reasons that it's made for us to be out of shape is the food around us. Okay, now food companies spend trillions and bazillions of money on hiring the best neuroscientists and the best flavor testing people, whatever they're referred to as, and all the best scientists straight out of the best universities to go work for their company because they're going to get paid the most. And what they're trying to do is to make foods that are so overly pleasurable that it makes us overeat on them. Okay? Now, again, all this stuff goes back to when we were cavemen. And if we could get our hands on food that had lots of fat, lots of sugar together, those two things usually lead it to having lots of calories. Let's say, in evolutionary terms, it would be a pot of honey. If we could get that, well, our brain are going to reward us with nice release of dopamine to say, well done, make sure to do that again, because that's going to allow us survival. So we've evolved in a way, and this is outlined way more in depth in the book called The Hungry Brain. It's got by Dr. Stefan Guyenet. Absolutely unbelievable, and to explain all these mechanisms. Okay, so fast forward to today. So we know, especially foods with, again, keeping it real simple, foods with lots of sugar, lots of fat in them together, and again, going off oh, I'm addicted to I just love sugar too much. Okay, yes, but look at your favorite foods. They have fat and sugar together. Chocolate, fat and sugar, pizza, fat and sugar, all the ice cream, all the stuff that you love, it's together with it. So, food companies, these sneaky bastards, hire all these smart people to make these foods, contain combinations of food preferences. So we mentioned sugar and fat. The other ones are obviously salt, umami, protein. I think that's all of them. Forgive me if I left one out. Okay, and they're trying to make combinations of these are innate food preferences that our brain rewards us when we eat in a way that our brain is going to release lots of dopamine to reward them, and thus we will keep eating it. So it does hit the same dopamine centered part of our old brain the same way: gambling, sex, drugs, all these kind of quote unquote addictive things. Now you probably have heard, oh, sugar is addictive as cocaine. It's not. It's not. It's definitely not. But it hits the same part of the brain, so it kind of works with the same mechanisms. But the dopamine release is not anywhere near it. Okay, so it's yes and no, not to the same extent. Okay, so these food companies make all these really high rewarding foods, okay, that our brain is preference to eat. Okay, so I'm sitting on the couch here, and there's say Ben and Jerry's in the freezer. Okay, a few hundred calories, and there's some spinach in there. What do you think my brain's going to go and tell me to eat? No, it's not the spinach. It's the high calorie stuff. Because our brain's preference for these foods, okay, and our brain kind of knows, especially if we've eaten that Ben and Jerry's before, it knows there's a lot of calories in that. Okay, so when we eat a food, your brain does all these calculations that it knows these are highly rewarding foods. It releases dopamine, and it's trying to get you to eat the same foods again. So it knows if there's Ben and Jerry's in there, and for me to go and get that food, it only takes a few calories. And in return, I'm going to get a big calorie return on that. So I might expend 2 calories going to get it, and I'm going to get in 500-600 calories. That's a big win by your brain standard. Now, all this stuff's going to make sense when we talk about food and environment, so stick with it. So if it knows that it's going to release dopamine to motivate us to go and get that food, okay? Think of all the high-calorie food in your house. Think of how easy it is to eat it. And again, this why the old saying is, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And this is referred, as I said, as the cost of food. Okay, so your brain's doing all these economics, behavioral economics calculations at a subconscious level, because in caveman times, it's always trying to weigh up, is going to get that food going to be a big win? Is it going to allow us to survive? There's no point in caveman times going out on an all-day hike to get food if it's only spinach. We need to make sure that the reward is going to be big enough. So your brain does all these calculations and at a subconscious level. Versus if that's Ben and Jerry's, was say down the road, a kilometre away. Excuse me. If that was down a road a kilometre away, the motivation to go and get that food isn't going to be big. It's going to be lower. So your brain doesn't release as much dopamine, so your motivation is lower. Okay, so what do we have? We have food companies that are making these overly tasty foods that not only release dopamine the same way it would when we were in caveman times with a little bit of honey. These are overly stimulating amounts of dopamine. So they're way higher than what we would normally get at from normal whole foods. Okay? So they're releasing abnormal levels of dopamine that is rewarding you abnormally high. And when dopamine is released from eating these highly rewarding foods, what it also does is it basically turns off your appetite so you can overly eat these foods. Again, think back to caveman times. If we could get our hands on very high calorie food and it's going to release dopamine, it's going to turn off your appetite in a way so you can just eat and store that food because you don't know when you're going to get it again. Okay? Now, let's go back to Mrs. Jones telling me how she doesn't have any willpower, doesn't have any self-control, and doesn't have any discipline. Well, when I do an environment assessment on Mrs. Jones and I work with her, oh, Sean, I just can't stop eating the Ben & Jerry's. Where is the Ben & Jerry's? Oh, it's in the freezer. Oh, okay. Well, did you know when the food's there, you're more likely to eat it because blah, 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 blah? Oh, no. People think of willpower and discipline and self-control as the ability to say no to temptation when it's right in front of them. The most successful people use their discipline, willpower, and self-control, and they don't have any more than people who fail all the time. They just know themselves, and they don't put that temptation in front of them in the first place. So they know when not to be tempted. Okay, so again, go back. Our goal is to try and make good habits easy to do and bad habits hard to do. So if you're trying to make these unfavorable habits hard to do, you're not going to have the high calorie rewarding food around, because again, it's just hijacking your brain and your brain's preferences. Your brain doesn't fucking care if you have abs or if you're going to be lean for your holiday. It just knows the way it's been programmed millions and millions and millions of fucking years. Okay? So get out your head about all this discipline, self-control, and learn the way your brain is preferenced to eat these foods, and then control your environment so these foods are not around overstimulating and tempting you all day. Now, when I talk about discipline, like we said, people that are successful simply have less temptation in their environment. Thus, their likelihood of failing is lower. Okay, that's pretty simple, and hopefully it's starting to come together now. Now, I'm not saying you can never have these foods. We're going to talk about that at the end. But there's ways that I'll get people to have these foods. Okay, that will hopefully help as well. Now, okay, Sean, but I can't get rid of these foods because I have a partner, my partner eats these foods, and I have kids and the kids eat these foods. Okay, cool. We're trying to make the bad habits hard to do, okay? Yes, okay. Now, I dealt with a client before, and her boyfriend, basically, I said, okay, this is what we're trying to do. Let's do an assessment of your environment. You're binging out all the time. Are you buying the foods you binge on? Yes. Okay. Why? Well, I'm not buying it, but it's in my house. My boyfriend eats it. Okay. We need to handle that as well, don't we? Now, I said, okay, tell your boyfriend, blah, 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 all the stuff I've just mentioned. Oh, no, my boyfriend just said, oh, you need to have more discipline. I'm not changing my environment to suit you. You should be more disciplined. Okay, I know. A lot of women and men are going to be fuming just hearing that. And it did make me fuming. I was absolutely fuming. Because I know it's not down to discipline. It's such a... it's one of those myths that really annoy me. And okay, let's have a think. And what we basically came up with, and again, drastic times cause of drastic measures, but I've used this approach a number of times since then, is she basically bought a box with a lock on it, and she put all his food in that box with a lock on it, gave him the key, and said, this is where your food is now, don't have it around me. Okay? And even when you're bored, when you're bored and it's probably late at night and you've watched TV, and you end up just checking your fridge 100 times to see if there's food there, because there may be something there that you didn't check the other 98 times, just because of our boredom. Okay, if there was really high calorie food there, that could be the difference between ruining that person's calorie deficit for the day versus if it's in the box and you really want to get in the box, but you can't, and you get tired and you go to bed and you wake up the next day and go, oh, thank God I didn't get into that box. Thank God that lock was on it. Okay, so that's one approach that you may use if your kids are eating these kind of foods in moderation, hopefully. I just had a conversation with one of my clients today, and we were discussing kids becoming overweight, and they didn't actually know that. And I think when kids before a certain level, I don't know, 6 or 8, it's only first few years of their life. If they gain fat at that level, up to that age, those fat cells are always around. So throughout later life, they're in a bit of a harder position because all you can try to do is shrink those fat cells. They won't go away. You've made those fat cells, they're going to hang around. So again, if the food's making you out of shape, also think about what it's doing to your kids as well, and you may use alternatives from there. Okay, just try to throw that in. So if your partner or kids have those foods, you can do that. Okay, and again, there's some crazy people that can have junk food in the house and not eat it. Okay, but they're few and far between. So you just have to see how you failed in the past and then approach it with an appropriate strategy. For some people, it may be enough just putting this food at the top cupboard where they need to get a chair and get up onto it, because if we look at habits are very automatic and they're unconscious, versus if you're stressed and you stress eat, well, now you've just put something in between the trigger and the routine, and it becomes more conscious again, because you consciously have to go over and get the chair and put it up and do all this, and you make it a little bit harder to carry out that. So for example, people have used, okay, I'm going to let you have the chocolate, but you have to go and get it from the top of the cupboard, and you have to get a plate, and then you have to get a knife and fork, and only then you can eat the chocolate. Again, you're just trying to find the strategy for it. Okay, so in some cases you may use a box with a lock on it. In some cases you just might put it in the top of the cupboard. And what you need to understand, actually, very important to note, well, my boyfriend can have the food in his house and he doesn't mind not eating it. Okay, what you have to understand is that when we're in a calorie deficit and we're basically trying to starve your body, certain mechanisms are going to increase. Your hunger is going to go up. Your appetite is going to go up. You're going to notice more high calorie food in the environment. When you eat this very processed food, you're going to get an even bigger dopamine hit, a bigger reward, which then means it's going to be way easier to overeat on that food and overeat. Just if you know anyone that has competed in, say, physique or a bodybuilding show, you'll know in those last few weeks of dieting, when they're starving their body to the body's limits, they'll begin to actually become more aware of high calorie food in their environment. The smell for high calorie food goes up. So these senses to stop you starving are all heightened. So you may be, in a sense, less disciplined, because that's what's supposed to happen. As simple as that. Don't fight it. Go with it and plan your strategy around that. We even know, like, if I'm with Louise, if she's in a deficit, okay, well, it's pretty stupid of me to buy all this beautiful bread that I can fit into my calories and leave it around when she can't eat it, because that's going to increase her chance of failure. Okay, so leading on to the next point, if you're trying to lose fat, you need to get the people around you on board as well, because the people around you are either helping or hindering. A lot of time they may hindering you because you haven't actually sat down with them and highlight how important this is to you. So I'll always get somebody to do that first, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family. They need to know how important this is for you, to help you along the journey. Because if they're not, a lot of time you're fucking pissing against the wind trying to lose fat if everyone around you is hindering. They don't know your confidence is at rock bottom, that your life's just a mess because you're out of shape and you really want to sort this part of your life out. Then you go out with your friends and they're peer pressuring you into drinking, or your colleagues are peer pressuring you into eating cake in the office, or your partner wants to go out. Okay, you need to get these people on board. You may not have, you may have people you work with who are not friends, and by you carrying out a fat loss plan, and if they are out of shape or they aren't carrying out a plan, what can happen, which you also need to take into account, is they may hinder your plan on purpose. Because if you say no to the cake and they say yes, well, what are you doing? You're highlighting their kind of quote unquote ill discipline. So you're highlighting how much they can't say no to it. So they may peer pressure you in. You know, I'm getting this person on my level. I'm going to make sure they eat the cake. They're not highlighting my discipline or my ill importance of my health. So you also need to take that into account. But for a byproduct, get your friends, get your family, get your partners, get them on board and make sure they're helping you carry out the right strategy to do this. That it will always work. It always works better for me if I'm training the husband and wife, or if I'm not, I'll always make sure to ring or email or be in contact with the husband and wife, whoever makes the dinner, to make these habits easy to carry out. they've done studies where if one person tries to lose weight, the other one's more successful. If two of them try to lose weight, they're both more successful. If you're in a relationship with one person that's overweight, there's a massive likelihood that you're going to be overweight as well, or become overweight. The same thing happens if you become overweight. There's more of a chance that your friend's going to become overweight as well, because your habits spread and we're social creatures. So if there are so-called quote-unquote friends around you that are constantly hindering your plan, well, again, that's another part of your environment you need to look at, and you need to make an assessment whether you're going to keep them around or not. Just going back to the food at home, your food environment at home, okay? Because as I said, it's the biggest place, and that's why it's a crazy times now, but it's the one time in our environment that you have complete control, unless you're one of those heroes working in hospitals. Salute you, we love you all. But for most of the people that are staying at home, it's the one time where you actually have complete control of your food environment. What's happened before is when people are working, okay, and then they're stressed and their blood sugar drops and they go to the food court, a lot of time the likelihood of failure goes up because your brain's immediate reaction is to go for this high energy foods. You smell all these foods, it's way harder. Okay, and again, just like we said, when your brain rewards you when you eat these foods, if you eat these foods, say you get a big high calorie croissant from your cafe, every time you go past that cafe, your brain remembers the context in which you got that food, and it will increase your cravings for when you go past that cafe. Again, it's pretty annoying now, but if you think back to caveman times, if your caveman ancestor didn't evolve with this mechanism, it would never know where to find that big thing of honey again, and then that will be enough calories to sustain our ability to evolve. So it all has mechanisms. Some of a lot work against us now. It's just like not naturally people are public speakers. We get that fight or flight response when we go on stage. They had a reason. It may work against us now, but you need to be aware of that and plan around that. So yes, like I was saying, where people go to work and this happens, and then in the office there is lots of high calorie food, which again is kind of increasing their chance of failure even more, which is why you need to tell your colleagues to keep it away from you. Then you go into the kitchen at work to try to prepare your own meals, but there's biscuits and there's high calorie food everywhere. Okay, well then maybe you probably shouldn't go into the kitchen. It's all about strategy, and it's all about guiding yourself on the easiest path possible to reach your goal, rather than having to face all these temptations on a daily basis. Combine that with a high stress work, and all that decision fatigue and low blood sugar and stress is a recipe for disaster. So we're trying to make the likelihood of success as easy as possible. But like I said, now is the first time ever where we have complete control of our environment. We're at home, so you need to capitalize on this situation and make sure all the foods around you are kind of low calorie, nutrient dense foods, the majority anyway. Veggies, fruits, good carbs, good proteins. So you're guiding yourself to eat those foods and stay on track. Again, when we eat whole foods, they're not stimulating like processed foods, so they're going to regulate our appetite much better. And a lot of times people can simply eat healthier and their appetite will regulate better, and they'll be in a calorie deficit anyway. For some of us, they need to track, but yes, it makes it much easier. So have a look around you at home, and you, especially the things that are eye level. They've seen where people, and we can all attest to this, including myself, if you have like a bottle of wine out at eye level, you're more likely to drink that when you're about to eat dinner or whatever it is. And whereas if you have fruit out at eye level, or bottles of water or whatever it is, you're more likely to have that. So the eye level stuff is specifically very significant. Plan your eye level stuff as best you can to keep you on track. If you like snacking, you work from home, cool. Get your carrot sticks prepared. Something very low calorie that is going to fill you up a lot. Celery sticks again, fruits. Like I said, that's going to be the most important stuff. And yes, the people at home, they need to be careful as well. So, Yes, a short kind of overview of our environment, a way our brain is preference to have high calorie food if it's there. Oh yes, that was what I wanted to touch on as well. Okay, so just like I said, for most people, we're trying to get them to eat lots of nutrient dense, low calorie food that basically fills you up, all your whole foods, so you're less likely to go over on your calories. However, there is a thing that in today's age, a lot of the time it isn't realistic to just cut out processed foods out of everyone's environment. And in some cases, / a lot of cases, it may be wise to actually give people a little bit of the foods they enjoy that they can eat and control, because then they don't feel mentally and physically restricted and they can stay on track long term. So you may get around to the 80-20 rule, where you get 80% of your foods from whole foods, but 20% from the foods or drinks that you may enjoy, the processed foods that we talk about, that put all the money into making them very, very tasty. And they are. And if you use that pleasure in control, okay, that's fine. Another one of kind of life's pleasures, like Lindt chocolate. Anyone's tasted Lindt chocolate, it's the most unbelievably crack cocaine kind of chocolate there is. It's so hard to stop eating. If they didn't have those wrappers on them that are annoying to open, you'd eat your weight and then some. So we have said that you cannot keep the high calorie food in the house. So what I will do for people when they want to include these foods is they will simply account for the amount they're going to have ahead of time, and then they'll go, especially if you're in lockdown, you get to go to the shop once a day or whatever it is. You'll go and you'll buy the exact portion of the enjoyable food that you're going to have. So if it's a bar of chocolate and okay, I've accounted for this 200-300 calories, just go by that particular size. Don't go buy the big block of chocolate. Oh my God, the amount of times I've said this. Don't buy the big block of chocolate if you're only going to have a few squares, because 99% of people, when you eat this food, like we said, it's overstimulating. It turns off your appetite so you can eat the whole thing. How many people have just said they're going to eat 2 squares of it and next minute the whole thing's gone? Me, definitely me, and everyone else that probably listen to this as well. So only buy the exact portion. And again, if I can include this in my clients and they go, oh Sean, I didn't know you could eat these kind of foods and still lose weight. You can. It comes down to calories, but the majority need to be calories that we're going to fill ourselves up on. You cannot just eat, for long term anyway, just chocolate, even though it's below your calories. You'll lose weight short term, but because you're so hungry, you won't be able to sustain that. So if I give you a little bit of chocolate every day and you eat that in control, and you may feel about a few seconds after, oh, I want a bit more, but then after you're good. If I give you a little bit of that every day, you're less likely to want to binge out by the end of the week. Okay, that's just human nature. We don't feel like we're on a diet. We don't feel like being restricted, and that's what we want for long-term sustainable success. So that's the way I would set up your environment. So do a kind of a like you do in business, a SWOT test. Do a SWOT test on your environment. What's at eye level? Are you making your good habits easy to do? Are you putting the fruits and veggies out? Are you putting? They've even seen this with like life saves in medicine. If they don't put it out, I know with vitamins, if they don't put it out in front of you to remind you, you're hardly likely to do it at all. If you live with people that have all this carbohydrate food, find out ways where you have your box, you put it on the top, you could tell them to hide it on you, whatever you need to do to make it easy as possible. The same way, do a little SWOT analysis on the people around you. Are they helping or hindering your plan? Do you need to actually have a conversation with them to explain what you're doing so then they can help you? Have all this stuff. Now we are being strategic. Okay, so just like I mentioned in the episode about habits, to finish up on, if I'm trying to not check my phone in the morning and go on Facebook, okay, I could wake up and go, oh, okay, Sean, today's the day. Use all your willpower to get the phone. Next minute you're scrolling. What's a better option? Well, it would be to take away the phone from the environment and put it in the other room and use an old-fashioned alarm clock. That way I'm less likely to sit in bed scrolling on it and be unproductive. So instead of trying to try harder, I need more effort, I need more discipline, self-control, willpower. No, you need a better strategy, okay? You need a better strategy that will help you achieve your goal with as less temptation in the environment as possible, that will inherently increase your chance of success and sticking with that. Okay? You are the product of your environment. You, being the listener to this podcast that wants to lose fat, are no different. Okay, I hope that was useful. Feedback would be brilliant. And yes, share it to somebody that needs to hear it. And a lot of people do, so I expect a lot of shares to people that you know, if you care about them. If you don't, then I don't know, send them a Jenny Craig YouTube video or something. Okay, there we go. Closing out. I love you all, and I will talk to you in the next episode.